Welcome to Woke House YouTube channel. My name is Kylie John Clark. I dedicate the merit of this channel to all sentient beings. May they find liberation. And I also dedicate it to my Lama, Lama Tuku Sori Dechen Rinpoche. I put links in the back. I'm a poor student of this great man. I don't know anything. I'm just playing around with the YouTube channel like an idiot. But if it can bring any type of at least entertainment of any person that is trying to study the Dharma or look into Buddhism, if nothing else, you can look at the link and go to my teacher's website and learn something of value opposed to my drivel. But at the last video, at the end of the last video, this guy named Siddhartha was kissing his wife goodbye and kissing his son goodbye and slipping out into the night to become an ascetic, to dedicate his life to understanding reality, the truth of how things are. And that's what Dharma means. It means the ultimate truth or the ultimate reality. He had seen a sick man, an old man, and a dead man, and he had seen an ascetic. And he had found out that the ascetic was trying to find out why we grow old, why we get sick, and why we die. And so even though Siddhartha had lived a pampered life, he realized that these things were going to happen to him also. It's the condition of all mankind, all people. All things are destined to arise, deteriorate, and fall apart into death. Cities, cars, people, places, things, all the conditioned reality arises, it falls into disrepair, it crumbles, it dies, and it rises again. Siddhartha left to become an ascetic, to study the Dharma. He took off his clothes, threw some ash on his face, and he turned his back on the worldly life to seek the truth. And so he hooked up with these 5 ascetics that were out there practicing. It became a little sadhu party. There's a group of sadhus that were sticking together to practice various things. One of the things that they did was live naked, live out in the elements, hot, cold, rain. They were sleeping outside. They felt like if they, just didn't put any value on the body, the less attention they paid to the flesh, the more the spirit would rise. And so they practiced all kind of things. When I went to India, I saw all kind of, and you can look, in books and videos and stuff, people that stand all day with their arm up, and they never put their arm down until it totally just withers. And, some of them have long fingernails, and their arm is skin and bones, or they hold their leg up until the leg withers. All sort of things, There's stories of people that have vowed to live as dogs, to live as cattle. Basically, what they're trying to do is push down the ego. They're saying, I don't value the flesh. I don't value the ego. I'm going to concentrate on the spiritual aspect of life and find liberation from this samsara. So that's what these practices, these austerities are supposed to do. Sleep on a bed of nails, whatever, to mortify the flesh. You see that in all kind of different religions. The early Christian, Catholic, various teachings. And as we'll see, the Buddha, he eventually renounced that. He didn't see any value in hurting the body. But at the time, they were doing things like eating 1 grain of rice a day. And there are statues of the Buddha where his eye sockets are sunk in. His face looks like a skull with skin spread across it. You can see all of his ribs. You can see his backbone. His arms are like twigs. His legs are like twigs from just starving himself, fasting. Just taking one simple blade, one simple grain of rice on the end of a grass blade. And that was his subsistence. That's all he would eat all day and spend the rest of his time in yoga practices and maybe chanting and meditation and that kind of stuff. That was like pre-Hinduism type of yogic practices with the sadhus or the ascetics that he was traveling with at that time. And every religion will have their esoteric form of practices. And so while there was probably priests and Brahmins and temples and things in Hinduism, Hinduism hadn't probably evolved to the state that we know it now. But you know, you have Islam, and then you have Sufis, and then you have Christianity, and then but you have the Desert Fathers, and then you have Buddhism, but then you have Vajrayana or some other types of fast vehicle or quick vehicle. You have Hinduism, but then you also have these sadhus or yogis and things like that. So every religion has its little subunits to them. So Buddha was out there starving himself to death, and he was learning all these techniques and things, but he got to the point where he almost died of starvation, and he was barely enough strength to sit up straight, and he realized that he was about to die without ever realizing the truth. So all these practices that served for naught, he knew nothing. All he did was starve himself, and now he's dying without knowing the truth. So then he's destined to be reborn again, hopefully as a human. Maybe not. Maybe he would be born in the hell realms, or you know, as an animal or a plant or any of these things. So he might have even lost the one opportunity he had as a human by just starving himself and dying without knowing. And at that time, a milkmaid, a single mother going to work with her child, apparently she had something to do in the milk industry at that time, and she saw him laying there, and she took her child over there, and they asked him if he was okay, and they fed him a bowl of milk, or actually rice and milk gruel, they call it, and he regained some of his vigor, and he was able to set up. And so this young lady, she began to nurse him back to health every day, bringing him food and water, and restoring his health until he was, you know, able to get up and help himself. And so, brought back from the brink of death, of starvation, he realized that when he lived a pampered lifestyle in his affluent home, he didn't learn anything. And then when he went to the extreme of starving himself and almost dying, mortifying the body, hurting the flesh, he didn't learn anything. So he said there must be a middle path. There must be a way right down the center of non-extremes. And as he was thinking about that, he remembered that as a child, he had fallen into a state of bliss during a festival where he was totally in the present moment. He was seeing this plow go through the ground, a plowing festival, and he saw these worms coming up out of the ground. And he was just right there, like totally non-distracted because of the compassion that he had for these worms that were being destroyed, or their homes were being destroyed. They were being turned upside down, and their life was being disrupted. So the compassion in his heart for these earthworms, seeing the plow go through and cutting them up, brought him to the present moment. And he was totally identified with their plight. And there was no past, there was no future. It was just him, the smell of the turning earth and the worms. And he realized that he was in complete contentment at that time, in a state of compassion as well as in the present moment. He had found happiness. So he went and found a tree that would later be called the Bodhi tree. Bodhi means wisdom. So he sat under this tree out in nature, and he vowed not to get up until he found the answer. And he continued to eat and drink water, but he wasn't going to rise from that spot until he found out how to get back into this place of happiness that he found as a child when he was sitting under that tree as a youth during the plowing festival. So he brought his mind to the present moment, and he began to contemplate his place in the universe, that is the very seat that he sat on, not in the future and not in the past, but on that very seat. And there he would attain enlightenment. And we'll talk more about that in the next video. But I often wondered about that milkmaid. I think her name was Sugata. Sugata and her little son going to work, and they see a homeless guy starving, and they take time to walk over and ask if he's okay, and later feed him and bring him back to health, and he would later become a Buddha. That poor starving homeless man on the side of the road would become the Buddha that would change multi-million lives and change my life. Had he died of starvation, had she not even went to go check on him, had she not felt the compassion to help this poor starving gentleman, we would never have heard the Dharma in our age, and the teachings might have been lost. And at the same time, you're going to find out that after his enlightenment, when he started eating again, when he was starving, and then she brought him that rice gruel and he ate, the 5 ascetics, his buddies, saw him eat, and they thought, wow, he's weak. He's abandoned the spiritual path. Look at him. Wow, he's eating. He must have renounced his vow to understand reality, or he's soft. Let's move. Let's not talk to him anymore. That's often what your buddies do whenever you want to change your life and you're outgrowing them in some way, or you want to change directions and do something beneficial for yourself. You might find your friends turning your back on you, and perhaps you're maturing a little faster than them, and you decide to do something with your life beneficial. They may turn their back on you. That's kind of how you know who your real friends are at the time. But after his enlightenment, and I've been there, to Deer Park in Sarnath. It's outside of Varanasi. I went to Varanasi and saw the Ganges River, and Mother Ganga. It was amazing to be there. It was almost like being in the National Geographic, to see the Ganges River and to see the funeral pyres of the Hindus that were being cremated. And from there in Varanasi, we went to Sarnath, which is right next to it. We went to Deer Park, and that's where Buddha preached his very first sermon after he got enlightened. He walked like 500 miles. I don't know if that's true or not, but for some reason I'm thinking 500 miles. The reason he walked that way all the way to Sarnath to preach, to deliver his very first sermon, is because he wanted to tell his 5 friends, those 5 ascetics or yogis or sadhus that he had been practicing with, he wanted to tell them that he had found the answer, that he had found realization. And so this guy that almost starved to death found the answer, walked hundreds of miles to find his 5 friends who were homeless men, and preached the very first sermon to the homeless. And they were homeless for a purpose, obviously. So all of that, there's little sermonettes and all of those things But the key thing is, after his awakening, even the people that had turned their backs on him, he wanted more than anything else to, because out of compassion and love for them, he wanted to help his fellow sojourners and tell them first the truth. And after he turned the wheel of Dharma and he spoke the first sermon in our era of the Dharma to those 5 ascetics, they became his monks. I shouldn't say became his, because he never sought to be a leader of anything, but they created a sangha. They began eating again and drinking water, and they became from ascetics or yogis or sadhus. They became monks. They became a sangha that has lasted even up till today. All right, so we'll pick up Buddha's story in the next video. Thank you.